today's episode, the Brightening, and it brought me back, actually, to a time when it felt like things were possible in spite of. I mean, there still are, but when you're young and surrounded by a great film collective that was actually in the making with this film, I must give a big shout out to the Good Army, wherever you are. The Good Army was a collective of actors and filmmakers, and we made 3 feature films together and many other things. And the main idea was to creatively unite and to make a new type of films or tell a different kind of stories that was driven by the creators. And I mean, obviously it's not the first time somebody saying like, let's start a band together, but the idea was kind of like to start and form a creative band that the production was also rooted in, like an, United Artists. Yeah, this is the story how we made the Brightening. If you want to see the film, you can see it on vimeo.com/Johan Melin. All right. I came from a small town where, if you wanted something done or create something, you had to do it yourself. And I think that this, gene or this spirit of mine has followed me throughout my life, for better and for worse. And I would like to say to anybody who goes around with the idea of making something and in the end doesn't because they worry too much about the outcome, is that the way I see it with a film like The Brightening is that, the thing was that there was a time where films, if they were made independently, real independently, they had a venue, or they had some homes. There were these small windows for them, some harbors for them. And these days it seems to have, in people's minds, have shifted over to how many views do you have, how much money do you make. Everybody's kind of running on these same attributes, as in, if something is not seen by X amount of people, then it's not good enough. And I think that you have to open your kind of third eye and see 2 things, like who is watching. Like my daughter, I can see this with my daughter then, that a lot of things she's watching is autoplay, from YouTube, things that come up, the algorithms, recommendations on what to view, right? And you can see this, many times I'm used to this also, that you can have these great cinema venues, beautiful cinemas, also like when we premiered The Brightening in Skopje, in a fantastic cinema. there in the Kinotekas cinema. And even if the arrangement is for free and it's something you can't see anywhere else, there's not so many people coming, And then you can always say, yeah, it's bad marketing, it's bad this and that. But I think we must take a step back from this hysteria of numbers, because it's just numbers. And everybody has the kind of get rich or die trying self-help novel, People want the surface of power or the surface of wisdom or the surface of clarity. And you can always these days present anything as something great and fantastic. Then it really doesn't matter what the content is, It's all illusion, that something ends, on all levels. And that includes the films or the works that you make that for various reasons, often commercially, right? If they're commercially viable, if they come out or not, the main thing is that you have a tendency when you're in the moment of something to see it kind of divided very, very simple between failure and success, And when I look upon Ljusningen, or the Brightening as it's called, it's, it was not only like a film school, but it was the kind of film you make when you have been 4 years in a film school, taught the exact rules of cinema and very, very boxing and sometimes limiting ways of how you can tell a story. This was my liberation attempt to tell the story of a man who is basically also all of a sudden confronted with his own inferno of his own hiding into being something that he's not, in the hamster wheel, denouncing all his artistical ambitions and try to kill off something precious inside of him. Dante Olsson comes to Denmark from Sweden in order to finish his novel. But instead, he finds love in Anette. He marries her and she gets pregnant, and Dante takes a job that he doesn't seem suited for in his father-in-law's meat factory. And everything is ça va bien in the hamster wheel until that very day when he is going to a church. Maybe it's because that he wants some strength in order to keep up his appearance as a good citizen, working time away and not able anymore to finish his precious novel. And there in the church he meets a woman who says she is in direct contact with God. And all of a sudden this woman, Natalja, starts to appear in both in Dante's subconsciousness and his dreams. All of a sudden he is able to look at his very mundane life with new eyes. One night a small kid is all of a sudden standing over him by the side of his bed and leads him into his working room where his typewriter is starting to write by itself that he must kill the prime minister in order for God to come back to earth. And at first he's very nervous and worried about this idea, but when he approaches this mysterious woman, Natalja, who now has become his muse, she thinks it's really, really true. And his novel that he hasn't touched for quite some time due to his writer's block is start to flourish. And slowly Dante finds himself on a journey where he stands up against the routine life and decides to actually go through with this horrible plan of taking down the king for God to come back to earth. And cut back now to 2006 when I wrote this. I came from, as you know, from a previous episode about misfits, which I had written as my kind of magnum opus. I was 1 year out of film school and very eager to make a film, because now it would have happened. I've been in school for 4 years, and now it was the time for everything to happen all at once. Instead, I found myself in a place where everybody said, "Oh, Misfits, great, but too dark. Make something else. Make something simpler." And I found myself also, like Dante in Alighieri's Inferno, in a very, very dark forest. I had also written another script together with Tobias Lindholm, who is a great writer and director. That was called Strained, a story about a refugee who decides to kind of break out after he gets his asylum, his rejected asylum, and decides to break out of Copenhagen and go to Sweden, go on the road in a stolen car together with another refugee called Branka. And their very tragic Romeo and Juliet-esque love story. There was also some kind of bore some resemblances to Nunning, which I talked about in a previous episode, and also a film that I later developed further into a film called I Fly. Anyhow, we had gotten reacted on this story, and I found myself, as previously mentioned, in a dark forest. Not at all what I had expected, I had expected great stuff, because I made Köftbögen, and I was, in those days, this was like 3 years earlier, offered, having a lot of offers, and I made a great graduation film, finding myself again in kind of like having the upper hand, but it seemed like everybody had a very determined idea of what I should make, but I wanted to go my own way. I wanted to make Misfits. That didn't happen. I wanted to make this Strained. That was a kind of much more concentrated breaking out of prison and coming of age story. That didn't happen, and then I found myself in, I think, 3 days in one flow, kind of writing this story called The Brightening. And it was somehow, how to say, condensation of everything that I stood in at that point, I wanted to make a satire about normie, so to speak, or somebody who had forced himself to become normal, kind of against his will, out of his duty to his family, but had also somehow oppressed his inner dreams, right? A writer who found himself in a state of writer's block, but also in a somehow state of writer's block in his book of life, so to speak. And I was also very inspired by Philip K. Dick. And at this point, I think the Brightening is actually mostly inspired by Philip K. Dick's Valleys trilogy, which is actually the true story of when Philip K. Dick had a kind of breakdown or a breakthrough, depending on how you see it, and believed that he was contacted by a entity called Valleys. And this intelligence actually somehow fucked everything up for Philip K. Dick, and on other levels maybe it helped him. And he wrote what he thought was his exegesis, like a never-ending book. Maybe, I think it was 3,000 pages or something like this, of what this entity was telling him. But my take on this was that, what would happen if you take this kind of character that is very moral, but also in a way some people would say weak, in this sense that he is not doing anything out of his own will. He's doing it all the time for somebody else, or he's telling himself that he has to be in the hamster wheel in order to survive or maintain. But that is actually what's producing this craziness within him. And then I saw this character, Natalja, that he meets as some kind of the muse, the holy muse comes back. She unleashes his creativity, but the creativity as such, the kind of price he pays for going into himself and the love of stories again, is that his life becomes kind of like a crazy story, and slowly he evolves into this kind of taxi driver character, where he actually cuts off everything that has to do with his ordinary life and goes full on in order to go through with this crazy plan of assassinating the prime minister. And as the story unfolds, his, so to speak, illusions and his reality is kind of starting to blend into each other, so you don't know what's what anymore. Dante is losing his wife. He leaves her, and he fully believes that he and this Natalja, his new muse, must together take the system down. So he leaves her, leaves the meat factory in order to do this assassination. So as you can hear, this is a kind of a strange story, and to me, when I wrote it, it was not. It was perfectly clear, and it was, a satire over our times, with this normal guy who is not really normal, but has kind of gone into the role of playing normal. What if he becomes one of these fundamentalists, who claims that he, by the authority of God, has the right to do these vicious acts. And it was also in a time when Denmark was actually at war, and the rhetoric was kind of, I think this us and them, or this very polarized rhetoric that you see everywhere today, not only in Denmark, also definitely in Sweden and the rest of the world. This was kind of on the rise back then, There was this feeling of media's bombardments started to become heavier and heavier. The artillery, so to speak, of media and information and catastrophes and shock doctrines started to kind of bombard us in a very, very, I think, for our minds and from an evolutionary aspect, very, very heavy way that today has led us to where we are now, where it's almost like this was the making of the on-off button, kind of, right? That we had this sense of that the world became smaller, but it also became bigger, and the state of fear became like everything goes on such a distance, so it's become normal to talk about other people in a totally dehumanizing way, and it becomes normal to see reality as fiction. It becomes a survival instinct to look upon your life as a narrative more and more, right? Where you are the sole proprietor and god of your own destiny. And what disappears in this, how to say, very, very thorough brainwash that is going on is you take out the class perspective, right? You take out the analysis of that there are circumstances. You take out the dialogue out of things, and you replace it with this kind of crazy, justified at the moment, killing, bullying, scaring the others, we and them, instead of the more, how to say, holistic and humanistic approach, which is that we are one, and we have allowed a system to be built around us that is controlling everything we do, and we appoint certain people, or we think that we appoint certain people to be in power and to execute the higher orders, whereas actually we are more and more without any, how to say, in any reach of being able to affect and to change the outcome of things. And I wanted this kind of double-sided story, where a man goes through this kind of transformation where he is, on the one hand, taking back his identity, which is a creator, right? But on the other hand, also loses his total sense of reality in doing so. So he and reality becomes fiction, and fiction becomes reality. You know what I mean? In the ancient societies, the story device of like the gods coming down and telling the main protagonist to do so and so, you know, now you must attack this, you must conquer this place, or you know, the stories of Revelation, you know, the ancient mystical writings was generally that people had a vision, or God was talking to them and saying, you must do so and so. And this was kind of like the motor of the story. And I tried to kind of do that in a modern context, but I think most people had problems with that. First of all, because they didn't believe. I think we're driven in this society like, you know, this kind of want society as such, that you pray to God when you want a cake falling down from the sky, like practical aspect of God, you know, that oh, you're fucked, you know, you need more money, I pray to God, you know, or I throw out to the universe from myself to have a great mansion and a great career, and thinking that is so all of a sudden God kind of fits a purpose in the great machinery, so to speak. And here I wanted this kind of guy who is a pacifist, who is asked to do something completely, you know, out of bounds, to take the prime minister down, and he will not get anything in return for it, except that God says that in this way the Godhead, or the fallen, the fall from grace, that God can come back to earth, right? And it's also a story about love, you know, that Dante is discovering in this kind of, he disowns his wife and kind of abandons this family life, and it's first when his wife has died he understands what this meant to him, you know. And if it would have been a American film, probably it would be like, you know, the story device there goes that the protagonist is kind of tempted, and in the end, of course, it would be in the American film, American version of the Brightening, the muse would die instead, right? Because she is the temptress who has tempted him into doing all this crazy stuff, right? And it's her fault. But the film didn't have this kind of pointing moral. It's what's very much more strange kind of tale of maybe reflecting upon everything that I had stood in myself, you know, that also probably my own sense of identity was withering when by that time, because I've been 5 years in Denmark, and to all of those of you who have moved around and, you know, come to a new country with new language, everything, I think you all know that it is also a sense of losing your identity, because identity is so much connected to language and, you know, these kind of parameters of feeling safe, so to speak. But all that had been kind of dissolved, and I also wanted to kind of make this upside down story about the man versus the machinery kind of story. Like Taxi Driver or Jacob's Ladder, or even some kind of Eraserhead by David Lynch. This very, very strange dissolving nature of things. I think it's also, in retrospect, and I was not a father back then. I think in retrospect it depicts kind of like a male pregnancy, so to speak, what to expect, part 3. And all the kind of fears that a human or a struggling artist has when a child is gonna come into your life. And the main role was played by Rainer Gerdes. And this was, I think, one of Rainer's first leading roles, and he did it brilliantly. I think he was also losing like 20 kilos for the role, and then gaining the weight again in order to, because the story is told from the point of view when he is in this mental ward, so it's kind of like his recollection of these crazy times and how it unfolded. And Anna Fabricius played the muse, Natalja, which was also very, very beautiful embodiment of this kind of larger than life character, and she was also kind of like changing from scene to scene, and there was something dangerous about her character, and at the same time very, very, how to say, tender. And Patricia Schumann was his wife, Anette, and she was also doing this with bravado and with everything she got, in this kind of very, very caring, loving wife who apparently also had to kind of oppress her darker sides and is pregnant, and with all the pressure that is, and at the same time has to face this guy who is basically going bananas in front of her eyes and kind of slipping through her fingers. And Anders Hove played her father, this ruthless CEO of the meat factory. And Thomas Knut Winterfeldt was this meanie, this anarchistic, crazy priest who also happened to be this arms dealer. And in other roles you saw Jakob Cedergren. He was this kind of consultant coming in to destroy the workers' lives, and also Nicolas Bro had a smaller role in it, and Klaus Flygare was this doctor. It was actually filled with great actors. But as it came about, the film, we didn't have a single dime, like I previously told you. I found myself once again with nothing. And Alphaville, Christopher Bo, they had been interested in me after the graduation film. They thought it was brilliant. And they were also into Misfits. The Film Institute thought it was too big, too dark, the good old tune. And they asked me, do you have something else, something else? And then I showed them the Brightening. And we didn't get any support for it, but they provided me with some tapes and editing suite. And Lars Reinholdt, whom I previously had done, he was my friend from film school, a great DOP, and he and I had worked on a film experiment, you can call it, omnibus project, where you follow these couples who were having this couple dinner, and you followed it from 3 different point of views, and it was originally from 4 point of views, every character's version of that night, kind of Rashomon styling, and then it was a different director for every character. And me and Lars, we made my version or my chapter of this omnibus film, and we both enjoyed, also from film school, working in this very, very long take. We had also done some film with Ricky Louise Andersson and Nicolas Bro on film at the film school, where we kind of staged it in a one take, and later on, I mean, this technique apparently was at its height when I made the film I made after the Brightening, called Preludium, which was 2-hour film shot in one single take. But already here in the Brightening, a lot of these techniques, so to speak, we were developing here, in terms of, because it was also a way of kind of going back to analog filmmaking. And what I mean with that is that what was so magical for me about a lot of these older movies was that this film poetry and magic was happening in front of your eyes, And to me, that's a certain kind of poetry. And then with this film, with The Brightening, we wanted that to happen, that, for example, characters go in and out of the shot as, and disappear, and, basically metaphysical stuff, but we were working on a way to make that happen on screen. And so every scene, as I recall, even though of course we somehow divided it up into shots, it was very, very often these long takes where the camera was very, very always in movement, and me and Lars later also apply this kind of way of working on to Prophecia, which was the feature I made after Preludium. So we did the film, a small guerrilla team. Yeah, it was quite a shoot, I must say, and the actors did fantastic embodiment of these very whacked characters, and there was this sense that everything was possible, And then I remember we were shooting the final scene on the bridge, between where you go over to Nørrebro in Copenhagen. We made this last shot in in a one take, very complicated grand finale. And afterwards, I was also editing this film. And afterwards, Lars Reinholdt, he gave me this tape. And he said, can somebody take a picture out of this book? So we have evidence that Johan now has the final tape, right? He said this for fun, but then we had this beautiful wrap party under the tree, this 100-year-old oak or whatever it is by the lake there in Copenhagen. And me and Anna and Rainer, we went in a taxi back to our place, and they were playing Time to Say Goodbye on the Time to on the stereo. And next day when I wake up, I actually wake up from a dream that this tape is gone, you know. And in the dream I was going to my jacket, to the pocket, and I felt it there. So in the dream I found the tape, and then I wake up next day, tape is gone, you know. Probably slipped out from a hole in my pocket or something. Catastrophe, disaster. And I will remember I was going on the streets of Copenhagen, kind of putting up these notes everywhere. This, you know, little that they put up for lost kittens and lost puppies and stuff like this. And I had put up this lost tape, you know, lost master tape. The tape didn't magically reappear like some scene in the film. It was gone forever. And I had to call everybody and say what had happened. And to my surprise, most of my team, they were like, mother. And then they were like, okay, we do it again. We do it again. This is how much they believed in it. And this was even in a situation where nobody got paid for this film, right? Nobody. Anyhow, we did the scene again. It became actually much better. So we had a fantastic feeling of, through a collective effort, have made some kind of something really, really special. But when we showed it to people, it was with the greatest distaste, and, you know, like you had farted the smelliest death fart in the room, you know. When people saw this, they were like, what the fuck is this, you know? It was, to them, so weird and so bad and so everything that they didn't like about film, or, you know, literally it was this very, very strange feeling, because we thought that we had pulled off something fantastic, which I still to this date, I hold this film very, very dearly, and I thought it had the ability to be a film about, you know, the disillusionment of the times, and, you know, a beautiful emotional story about Mr. Normal going bananas story. But I don't know, you know, people felt maybe threatened by it because it didn't say that any of this was wrong. It kind of also operated in a universe on its own terms, you know. And Christopher Bo, he was the director who had Alphaville. He was like, after he saw this, he was like, everything I liked about your graduation film is not here, you know. And then he was basically holding the film down under the water until he thought it had died. At least that's how it felt. And a lot of other colleagues also, people that I respected and kind of wanted to share this beautiful masterpiece with them, they were like, what the fuck, you know. Somebody said, some film commissioner was saying like, you know, the film is actually very, very good, but you don't know where to put it. And I was like, where do you want to put it? Yeah, but you know, he said, you know, like where you hang your coat, you can't hang this on anything, right? We had aimed for all the great festivals. Nobody wanted to show this film, you know, and it was very, very strange, you know, because you had this feeling of you had actually, you were the one who was right and everybody else was wrong, but maybe people didn't understand it. Maybe that is the thing. I notice this sometimes. I mean, I can also say it for myself, you know, that if people don't get your film, they react very, very hostile to it, because then I think their inner critic is awakened, and you start saying what should be done with something that is, you know, alive on its own terms, you know. And we tried to, you know, I edited many versions of it, and even though I landed in a version, actually, because the film was kind of, even though it seemed like a linear movie, it was very, you know, non-linear film in a way. It was just a kind of, it was like a optical illusion, you know, that you, maybe when you saw this film on paper, it could be like 1, 2, 3, but actually the film was more like a 3-to-1 film, if that makes any sense. And instead of, in my maybe own insanity, thought that this would be hailed as the cinematic equivalent of a Philip K. Dick novel, it was never seeing the light. I never got any distribution. I didn't find anybody who would want to touch this until many years later. I decided to finally do a final sound mix together with a brilliant sound engineer called Bobby Hess. And I also remember my friend Ted Fransson, the musician and composer of the film. He was like, maybe you should just kind of like blow the narrative on this one, make it a completely incomprehensible story, like how this guy is seeing the world, you know. And I think, you know, when I see the film today, it still to me makes total sense. And actually the film premiered first in 2019 for the first public screening at the Cinematheque in Macedonia, in North Macedonia, where I was living at the point. And they were doing a retrospective of all my films. And when we screened the Brightening there, it was actually, how to say, received maybe as the way I wanted it to. And it's also available online on vimeo.com/Johan Melin if you want to see it. But I think with time, this film has shown itself to be more timeless and poignant than you might think. That also it's, to me, more and more a story about somebody losing the grip of reality and somehow must reevaluate who he is and to kind of embrace the love that is all around him, and must kind of let go of this idea that he is a beautiful, unique snowflake, and instead understand that we're all one, if that makes any sense. This is also interesting because generally my works are pretty comprehensible, I think. This film was an idea of making something which kind of, in my filmmaking, it's always been like two tracks. Like, one is the more realistic, the realistic type of story that is very rooted in some kind of reality, and the other one that is rooted in reality, but reality is kind of dissolving. And in a way, in a time and era where everybody seems to live in some kind of projection of their own mind more and more, I think this film is an interesting, how to say, narrative in this part where also people today struggle with things like, where is the hope in this darkness? Where is a thing such as love and understanding, and also a dialogue with yourself that is truthful, that is not an edited version of it, but actually where you as a person get to ask yourself, what am I doing out of my free will, if there is such a thing, and what do I do because somebody tells me to? Because that is the interesting thing, that if it would have been money who stepped down to Dante Olsson and told him, you must do this and that, then people would maybe have understood it better. If it was Mammon, the great god, you must do this for $1 million. And that's also an interesting thing, that we have a tendency to say, like, these people who believes in something else than society or money, that they are dreamers, so that they are, for many of these people also, that they feel themselves as failures because a dream has to kind of manifest in monetary assets, or has to manifest into, making a successful business or something like this. Otherwise, it's not legit. But the truth is that I think it's interesting with a story with somebody who goes on a journey and is kind of confronted with, what is my will? What is, we talk within the film world, or at least I do it, about want and need. Every character has a want and a need. But today you see this in many stories, that the want and need is kind of like the same, right? It's more and more the kind of moral to the stories. I'm not like a fan morals to the stories, but I'm a big fan actually of virtues and complexity. You know, the complexity of characters. And it seems to me that bringing God into a story, because it's also provocative in this sense that what God, you know? I hope that you who create something or want to create something, that you do it no matter what. Don't worry about the outcome. Don't worry about the reactions. The bottom line is that we have to keep on creating, and we have to create against these totally shitty odds of your film suiting the very, very, how to say, despicable tastes of the contemporary time. It should instead aim to do something else, you know, because film is still a relatively young medium, and I think there is no limits for what we can do with it. And I don't say that I reinvented cinema with Brightening, but I found, like Marlon Brando says on the waterfront, I could have been somebody, I could have been a contender. And why is that striking a chord, you know, in so many people? Because I think we're all gifted with this special way of seeing it. And then too much time is spent on trying to kind of reverse this unique seeing, or blindness even, reversing your clarity into some blindness to please and appease an imaginary audience that is always much smarter than you think, you know. And with time, let's see what this Brightening will do for cinema. At least it's interesting attempt of trying to tell something else, trying to tell something about that movement and that impossible and crazy task of taking down the machine, or being part of the machine and trying to break out. Remember, we are humans, not robots. This is Made Unmade.